well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. Welcome to another edition of Bearing Arms, Cam & Company. My name is Cam Edwards. I am so glad you're with me on the program today. We're going to be talking with Brian Strasser of the Minnesota Gun Owners Caucus. You know, when we had Brian on not long ago, he mentioned this law review symposium that was coming up at the University of Minnesota. I said, well, look, let's have you back on, because he said he and Rob Dorr were going to attend. I said, well, let's get you on after that takes place. So Friday, the symposium is held. The caucus tweeting out, or I guess posting on X, running commentary about some of the panels. It was really fascinating stuff. But I wanted to get Brian back on the program, so he'll be with us here in just a minute. Before we get to that, I do have a couple of other things to talk about, starting with Biden's America. It is crushing us. You've got companies laying off tens of thousands of workers, one after the other. Americans working two jobs just to get by. Inflation pushing hardworking families to the brink. Just look at the price of lunch meat next time you go to the grocery store. And a digital dollar could be coming down the pipeline to completely destroy our way of life. The truth is, you need a plan. You know it, and I know it. And that's why you should call Goldco. So you can diversify your savings and investments with gold and silver before things get worse. They're a 6-time Inc. 5000 winner, 2022 Company of the Year, thousands of 5-star reviews, and they've helped people like you and me place over $1 billion in gold and silver. They're offering up to $10,000 in free silver while supplies last. And if you call them today, qualified callers will get a free Ronald Reagan half-ounce silver coin. So don't wait. Call Goldco at 855-412-3806 today. That's 855-412-3806. So while Brian was hanging out at the symposium, John Petrolino and Charlie Cook from Riding with Shotgun were in John's car heading down from the People's Republic of New Jersey into free territory in the state of Virginia. They came down Friday afternoon. We got a chance to go Sporting Clays shooting on Saturday. As a matter of fact, Miss E went Sporting Clays shooting for the very first time in her life. Excuse me. She had a blast, no pun intended. A little bruised afterwards, but, smiles all around. And then Saturday night, actually Friday night, after John and Charlie had rolled into town, I get a text from Charlie. He says, hey, what are you doing tomorrow night? Do you want to go see a show? And I was, well, who's playing? Oliver Anthony, playing a hometown gig in Farmville. I think this is the first time that Oliver Anthony was back in town since he just, blew up, right? He had a show at a little restaurant called the North Street Press Club, like 2 or 3 days after he started going viral for Richmond, north of Richmond. And since then, he's been away. He's been touring, playing other gigs. But he came back, played a show at Longwood University in the basketball arena. He was like maybe 2 blocks away from this restaurant that he was playing in a couple months ago that seats maybe 200 people. This place, I don't know, several thousand, maybe 3,000-4,000 people. So we were able to get tickets. The tickets were sold out, but we were able to get reasonably priced tickets via a third-party vendor. So the three of us went down to Farmville. We saw Oliver Anthony perform. It's a great show. You can tell that success came very suddenly to Oliver Anthony, because I don't think he has a whole lot of songs in his repertoire at the moment. He ended up playing Richmond, north of Richmond twice because the crowd loved it. Closed the show with a cover of Lynyrd Skynyrd's Simple Man. But it was a great Saturday night. I think everybody had a really good time. And I want to thank John and Charlie for coming down and hanging out. Missy, like I said, she had an absolute blast, smile on her face all weekend long. She's so proud of herself. She did a great job, and she's ready to go back. So I'm excited about that. So anyway, hopefully you had as good a weekend as I did. We won't talk about Sunday. That was all of the work that I didn't get done on Saturday. I had to get crammed into one day. I'm still a little sore with all that stuff. But yeah, not nearly as much fun as we had on Saturday. Anyway, now let's get to another not so fun topic, the anti-gun movement in academia, which was on full display on Friday, again at the University of Minnesota and the law school, where the Law Review hosted the symposium, co-sponsored by Giffords. So, you can imagine the tone and the tenor of this symposium. Brian Strasser of the Minnesota Gun Owners Caucus was on hand, and he joined us earlier today to discuss what he heard there at the law school. Take a look and a listen. Brian, thanks so much for coming back on the program. It's good to see you this morning.
Great to see you, Cam. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So the last time we were talking, you had mentioned this University of Minnesota Law Symposium that was coming up. Co-sponsored by, sponsored by Giffords. So we know what kind of symposium this was. You were not on stage, but you were in attendance on Friday. What can you tell me about this symposium?
Yeah, so I think the one positive thing I would say is the University of Minnesota Law Review is entirely run by students, and so the students really picked the topic. They picked the panel. The panel makeup. I think we can talk about what those look like a little bit. But I will give the students credit. It was a well-run event, even though the bias from the anti-gun perspective was quite evident throughout the entire event.
Again, as you would expect with a gun control group like Gifford's involved. So what were some of the panels? I know that at one point weren't they talking about there was one panel I think with like racial justice issues. Keith Ellison was a part of that panel, right?
Yeah. So the initial panel was about racial disparities in criminal justice, focused on gun laws, right? And so there were a couple different panelists, one of which was Attorney General Keith Ellison, who we've squared off against not only back to his time in Congress, but he's currently defending the 18 to 20-year-old carry ban before the Eighth Circuit. We beat him in federal district court along with Firearms Policy Coalition and the Second Amendment Foundation. They've now appealed, and so we're waiting on that appeal to go through. And then they had there were a few other panelists. They were all primarily law professors or historians to some perspective. One of the law professors on the panel, I think he was from NYU, brought an interesting perspective. He'd been a public defender in Washington, D.C., and talked about how they used Heller and McDonald to get gun convictions overturned. At the time, the District of Columbia had a complete firearms ban or handgun ban. So he talked a little bit about that, but then just completely pivoted to, I don't want more guns in the community. So I feel conflicted about, using these to reduce racial disparities, using gun rights to reduce racial disparities.
Yeah,
that was the first panel.
Okay, yeah, and I wrote about this based on your running commentary on X because I thought it was interesting where when Ellison talked about wanting to go upstream, right? Well, we can't arrest everybody who's carrying a gun illegally. You got to go upstream. So you got to go after the firearm dealers. You got to go after not even the straw purchasers, it sounds like, but he's focused almost entirely on the FFL side of the equation, right? Not the prohibited possessors, not the people who are, trafficking in firearms, but let's go after the gun stores and shut them down.
Yeah, I mean, he's engaged in a current lawsuit here against Fleet Farm. Fleet Farm, being a regional retailer, one of the biggest firearms retailers in Minnesota, Wisconsin, Iowa. I think there are a few other states. Formerly owned by a Minnesota family. They sold a few years ago. They're suing Fleet Farm for negligent sales, whereas Fleet Farm is saying, well, look, we followed federal law. Everybody we sold a firearm to passed the NICS check. And they're trying to hold Fleet Farm accountable essentially for a straw purchasing group that was going through multiple Fleet Farms, buying firearms and then selling them on the street. I don't know that that's Fleet Farm's fault that happened. I don't understand the negligence. And he did get called on that by a law student in the audience, a second-year law student who said, I don't understand the negligence here. And Ellison goes, well, just wait till the discovery comes out of what we've learned. But he wouldn't answer the question. I was like, really? So, well, what is it?
Right.
What's going on? And I mean, we've read all the court filings. We haven't seen anything that indicates any kind of negligence on the part of Fleet Farm. So we'll see where it goes in court.
Yeah, we'll see. But again, I mean, around the country, what you see is that efforts to fight straw purchases are primarily, FFLs play an integral role in that, right? You've got the Don't Lie for the Other Guy program that the NSSF has had in conjunction with the ATF and FFLs for well over a decade at this point. So I do think it's interesting that, he is, again, still doubling down on this idea that you don't actually have to go after the trigger pullers. Right. If you go after the trigger sellers, right, that's going to be enough to fight violent crime. Rahimi also came up during an afternoon panel, right?
Yeah. So the Rahimi panel, I mean, it was a good discussion on Rahimi. However, I would say 80% of the conversation was a public policy discussion around the intersection between domestic violence, intimate partner violence, and firearms. And I don't think, I asked a question of this panel. And the way I framed it was, I completely agree. There's an issue when you have violent individuals in an intimate relationship who have firearms and then use those firearms. I get it. I want to separate those folks. But your entire discussion here at a legal symposium was about the public policy aspects of this and the data behind it. And we all understand that. My question is, does Congress actually have the authority to remove an individual's right to keep and bear arms over a state family court order? Why is that a federal crime? That's the question in Rahimi that I think the panel would like for you to tell me where Congress gets that authority. And they all looked at me like I had 5 heads and said, well, the Commerce Clause allows Congress to do that. And they didn't go into any more detail. They didn't address any of the previous case law around the Commerce Clause and its intersection with the Second Amendment, the gun-free school cases, or some of the other cases that have come up. It was entirely a public policy discussion. They never really got into the legal aspects of Rahimi.
And I mean, on the one hand, I can't say that I blame them, because as you say, this is a much easier argument to make from a public policy perspective than it is from 100%. A legal perspective, right?
Right.
Even you talk to gun owners, no one's going to say, yeah, Zachary Rahimi is the poster child for the right to keep bear arms.
Absolutely
right? Here's a guy who's been accused of doing all kinds of criminal offenses that go, by the way, before and after he had that domestic violence restraining order. But that's not the question. The question isn't whether or not Zachary Rahimi is a good guy. Right. The question is, can he be prohibited from owning a firearm because, as you say, because of that mechanism, right? Because of that civil court order that was handed down in state court, as opposed to, I don't know, keeping him behind bars on a high bond because he is a threat to the community. There were other avenues, that could have been taken to deprive Mr. Rahimi of his right to keep bear arms, but that's not what happened. Right. And so I, again, like I said, I understand why they would like to keep this public policy focused, because when you get into those legal questions, again, I mean, okay, so the Commerce Clause. Well, that's awfully open-ended, isn't it? I mean, if you're going to say, well, guns are used in interstate commerce, and so therefore Congress can do anything they want,
that's
because these things travel in interstate commerce. I mean, that's absurd, right? Where's the limiting principle there?
Yeah, and they didn't get into any of that either. And I wasn't able to ask a follow-up question because I wanted to pose the very thing, right? The only intersection between a gun and interstate commerce is it got shipped somewhere, probably crossed the state line, and got to a gun shop where it was purchased.
Right.
That's it.
Right. And apparently that's enough for them.
Well, they're very much focused on the end means, right? They don't really like Bruin because it removes that idea of end means scrutiny and makes them justify this. There was a comment, I think, during the second panel about Bruin that Bruin has flipped things on its head, and that everything is now presumptuously unconstitutional unless we can prove that it is. And I'm sitting there going, that's the way all the constitutional rights should be, not the other way around, that it's constitutional just because Congress passed it or a legislature passed it.
Absolutely. But again, I mean, the Second Amendment is, I think, far and away the most disfavored right. We had Justice Thomas talk about Second Amendment can't be treated as a second-class right. But one of the struggles is to even have it recognized as a right. That's and right. Not even a second-class right, but just as a right and not a privilege to be doled out by the state.
I mean, our Attorney General has said on numerous occasions that Heller was wrongfully decided. And the Megan Walsh, who is the professor that oversees the gun violence prevention clinic, the gun control clinic at the University of Minnesota Law School, when she was a young lawyer, her firm filed an amicus in the McDonald decision and said there is no right for cities should be able to basically ban handguns like Oak Grove, I think it was Oak Grove, Illinois, that they were defending in that case.
So was there anybody in any of the panels that was supportive of the Bruin decision? I wouldn't even say pro Second Amendment, but just supportive of the Bruin decision. There was one panelist.
Oh, and to be fair to them, I left. I wasn't there for the last two panels of the day.
Okay.
I had hockey tickets with my daughter, but on the Bruin A Year in Review panel, there was a law professor there who was a Federalist Society member and had written in favor of Bruin. So he was the one dissenting voice, at least of the three panels that I saw, that argued about this. But even in his conversation, looked at Rahimi, because they asked that panel about Rahimi and history. He goes, well, with Rahimi, I think the court will find some gymnastics they will perform and rule against Rahimi, because it's such a bad look for them. So I found that interesting. That came up in a number of different contexts, but he was the only, pro 2A person that talked about Rahimi in that way.
And I've heard that as well. If that happens, I will just say I hope that those gymnastics don't provide an opening for all kinds of things to withstand constitutional scrutiny, because that's the problem. I mean, as we saw with Heller, as we've even seen with Bruen, the activist judges that can take one sentence and say, all right, that opens the door for a ban on assault weapons, right? This is we're dealing with an unprecedented societal issue that didn't exist at the time of the founding, and so therefore all kinds of gun control laws are acceptable. And going back to the makeup of this panel, or the how the symposium came to be, you said that it was the law students who put this together, but he also talked about the law review, or the law school clinic that's run by Megan Walsh. Brian, this is University of Minnesota is a public institution, right? I suppose there's nothing theoretically preventing a pro-Second Amendment law clinic from being established at the University of Minnesota Law School. But do you think that would ever actually happen?
Not at this law school, at least not with the current makeup of leadership. I mean, the law school is without a dean at the moment. The interim dean who kicked things off pointed out that he's been involved in this issue his entire career, that he had worked for the Violence Policy Research Center in Washington, D.C., and that he had been on Chuck Schumer's staff when Schumer was in the House of Representatives working on gun control issues. So I don't see the current law school leadership wanting to go in that direction. We're told, we have a cordial relationship with Professor Walsh. She knew we were coming. She acknowledged our presence. I did get to ask a question, like I said. At the same time, she comes at this from a very anti-gun perspective. She says that her curriculum is more balanced, but I'd like to actually see that to understand what that looks like. She certainly hasn't had us into class or anything to propose a different point of view.
Yeah. Well, and part of the thing about the clinic is, these are law school students who are assisting in cases, right? They're working on amicus briefs. They're doing research. And all of it seems to be, again, directed at either upholding gun control laws or pushing for new gun control legislation.
Not only that, she and some of her students are special assistant attorney generals of the state of Minnesota. We have a copy of Professor Walsh's appointment paperwork, just for perspective. Keith Ellison said that they were helping on the Fleet Farm case, and they were helping on our case, the 18 to 20-year-old Kerry case, to defend that before the 8th Circuit. And we know from their social media posts and comments at the symposium that they're helping county attorneys defend the constitutionality of Minnesota's gun laws as they're being litigated across the state, as public defenders and other attorneys bring challenges under Bruen. So we know they're doing more than just writing some amicus briefs. They're engaged in the actual litigation.
So that's obviously one of the challenges that you have going forward, right? You've got this sort of free legal aid for the anti-gunners. But I noticed on the Minnesota Gun Owners Caucus socials over the weekend, it looks like you guys are already starting to push back against gun ban legislation, right? You've got some members of the legislature who are pointing to Maine, pointing to Lewiston, and saying, look, this is why we need to ban assault weapons here in Minnesota. Do you expect that to be is that going to be a big push, you think, next year in the legislature?
I don't know what they're going to do next year, to be honest. The Democrats right now, the DFL, feel pretty good about their position. They have complete control of state government, as we've talked about before, both the Senate by 1 seat, the House by a handful, and they've got the governor and AG until 2026, at least. So, but next year is an election year for the House. So I don't know. I'll be curious how far they're willing to push. I don't know that they have the votes in the Senate, given the number of rural DFLers they have, to be able to move forward on any actual gun bans. And the people that are pushing this within the party, other than the state party chair, but the legislators that have introduced such bills, are definitely on the more progressive bent of the legislature, and I don't see them as having a lot of pull.
Okay.
Now, all that said, Gabby Giffords is coming here next week. Later this week, for a fundraiser with two of the rural DFL senators that were on the fence and ultimately voted for this gun control. That, I don't feel like that bodes well in terms of where they may go in the future.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I mean, certainly this is not a time for Minnesota gun owners to rest easy or to get complacent. And if folks, if there are gun owners in Minnesota who are watching right now, they want to become a part of the caucus, how do they do it, Brian?
You can definitely learn more about the caucus at gunowners.mn and follow us on Twitter or X and Facebook and Instagram. We're active on all three. If you do nothing else, get on our mailing list so that you get our action alerts, that you get informed about what's going on. Of course, we'd like you to join as a member and support us in that way, but it's more important that you join the mailing list and you take action when the legislature starts to move things in February next year.
Absolutely. Well, listen, I'm glad that you were on hand last Friday, and I'm glad you got to go to a hockey game as well. Yeah. So best of both worlds.
We lost to Wisconsin, but otherwise it was a good night.
All right. Well, it's not perfect, but it sounds like it was a pretty good Friday. Brian, thank you so much for your time, man. I look forward to doing this again very soon.
Okay. Thanks, Cam.
Many thanks to Brian Strasser for joining us on the program, as well as, again, for hanging out. That must have been infuriating. I'm sure it was enlightening just to hear where the end I got to say, oh, really? Okay, so that's where you stand. But I don't know if I could have kept my mouth shut for the entire symposium. So kudos to Brian for doing that. All right. Before we get to today's Armed Citizen story, our good deed of the day, and our recidivist report, just a reminder, Biden's America, it is crushing us. Companies laying off tens of thousands of workers, one after the other. Americans working two jobs just to get by. Inflation pushing hardworking families to the brink, as you know, every time you go to the grocery store. And a digital dollar could be coming down the pipeline to completely destroy our way of life. Truth is, you need a plan. You know it, and I know it. And that's why you should call Goldco, so you can diversify your savings and investments with gold and silver before things get worse. 6-time Inc. 5000 winner, 2022 Company of the Year, thousands of 5-star reviews. And they've helped people like you and me place over $1 billion in gold and silver. They're offering up to $10,000 in free silver while supplies last. And if you call Goldco today, qualified callers will get a free Ronald Reagan half-ounce silver coin. So don't wait. Call Goldco, 855-412-3806 today. That's 855-412-3806. And now let's turn our attention to today's Armed Citizen story, our good deed of the day, and our recidivist report. We'll start there with a case out of Florida, where a man on probation was arrested after allegedly threatening to shoot nurses at a hospital, also apparently attacked his pregnant girlfriend who was there to deliver their baby. 26-year-old Tavares Tyrell Smith arrested Friday night, charged with aggravated battery on a pregnant woman, 2 counts of threatening to shoot nurses, as well as preventing communication to law enforcement after allegedly hitting his pregnant girlfriend, grabbing her phone, and threatening to shoot nurses at UF Health Shands in Gainesville. University of Florida Police Department officer responded to the hospital about 10:20 Friday night after a call about a possible domestic battery. Security guard told the officer that Smith had been escorted out because he had hit his pregnant girlfriend who was causing a scene. His girlfriend says they were at the hospital to deliver her baby. When he became agitated, they started arguing. She said she became alarmed at his behavior. She took out her phone to take a video in case something happened. That's when he hit her in the chest. She said she tried to call 911, but he took her phone, threw it on the ground. She said Smith said he'd already shot a cop and would do it again if they came to get him. 2 nurses heard the argument, came into the room, and they told the responding officer that they saw Smith holding a pillow and threatening to kill himself. He then threw the pillow on the ground and said he was going to do a, quote, mass shooting in this place. And then he refused to leave. Security guards had to escort him from the building, trespassed him from the hospital. Officers later pulled Smith's car over and arrested him. After reading him his Miranda rights, he reportedly said that he was at the hospital and had an argument with his girlfriend and left. He said he became upset when he was told that he'd be charged with battery, and reportedly said, but there was no bruising. No bruising, so it doesn't count. According to the Alachua Chronicle, Smith has 3 previous felony convictions. Again, he's 26 years of age. One of them is a violent felony conviction. He also has one misdemeanor conviction for a nonviolent charge. He is on probation after pleading guilty to assault with intent to commit a felony in 2017. Now, according to the Chronicle, Smith has twice been convicted of violating that probation, apparently to little or no effect. Right now, Smith's bail set at $100,000. We will keep our eyes open for any more details in this particular case, but hopefully Smith's girlfriend was able to deliver her child safe from harm and will continue to be safe from harm when she leaves. Today's armed citizen story also from Florida, where a suspect, actually multiple suspects, breaking into a home in Pasco County. One of them shot and killed, 2 others detained. According to law enforcement sources, there were 3 individuals who tried to break into a home in Port Richey on Friday afternoon. Pasco County Sheriff's Office says the 3 suspects tried to break into the home in the Hickory Hill Drive area, but there was an armed citizen inside who fired back. One suspect passed away after being struck by gunfire, according to Pasco deputies. A second suspect also shot and fled to a hospital where they were detained by law enforcement. Third suspect in the attempted home invasion detained by Pasco County deputies after a brief search. According to the Pasco County Sheriff's Office, several schools in the area placed in a controlled campus status out of an abundance of caution. They say the shooting investigation remains active and ongoing. So we don't know if this was a targeted home invasion, if they knew the victim inside, or whether this was just a random encounter. Hopefully, again, we'll have more details as they become available. But to answer the question that the gun controllers love to ask, why does anybody need more than 10 rounds? Because you might have more than one person trying to break into your home to kill you, or to rob you, or to assault you, or to do whatever nefarious things they have in mind. You don't know what they are, by the way, because rarely do they announce their intent. But sometimes they don't show up alone. Finally today, our good deed of the day, in the right place, at the right time, willing and able to do the right thing. A man with a metal detector in Plymouth, Massachusetts, who came to the aid of a young child who had lost a necklace, a very, very important necklace. Necklace contained some of his mother's ashes. And he was at a soccer game, or soccer practice, I guess. 10-year-old Connor lost the necklace that had the locket inside. And he was out there on the field. His grandmother, Melissa Moriarty, said soccer practice stopped. Everyone went looking for it. They even went back to the field over the next couple of days, and they just couldn't find it. So a gentleman named Lou Assi volunteered to bring his metal detector out to the field and search. And Thursday night, he found the necklace and the locket. Connor has been carrying this locket for the past 3 years. According to his grandmother, he never takes it off. Only time he takes it off is when he takes a shower. His mom passed away in a car accident 3 years ago at the age of 31. And Connor and his family say they are obviously very relieved to have the cherished locket back in their possession. So, again, in the right place. I'm sorry, this gets me right in the feels. We've got a necklace. Many of my family members have a necklace with my son's ashes in it. So this hit me a little close to home. But I am so glad that Lou Assi was in the right place at the right time, willing and able to do the right thing to help a family in need and to, again, bring this little boy back in contact with his mom. So, Lou, huge tip of the hat to you, sir. That's going to do it for this edition of Bearing Arms Cam & Company. I want to thank you for being a part of the program, as always, and I'm looking forward to being back with you again tomorrow. It's going to be a 2A Tuesday. Who knows what the big news of the day will be, but we'll be talking about it here at BearingArms.com. Don't forget to check out the website in the meantime, where we are constantly updating with the latest Second Amendment news and information from all across the nation. If you like what you see, also encourage you to become a VIP or VIP Gold member. All you have to do, go to BearingArms.com/subscribe, use the promo code GUNRIGHTS, and you can get a significant savings on your VIP or VIP Gold membership. We're going to give you exclusive content you won't find anywhere else, news stories and analysis that matter, just like your support. So thank you again. Enjoy the rest of your Monday. You know, as good as you can. Oh, and by the way, a special shout out to Ronald Coons of, Coons versus Placken, who I found out is a Cam & Company listener. So, Ronald, thank you, sir. It is great to have you along. And thank you for your Second Amendment activism. We'll be talking to you again tomorrow. Until then, be well, be safe, and be free.